This is Land of Havilah, Mark 7b. Recently, Jesus crossed the Sea of Galilee with his disciples with the idea they were going to, quote, come apart into a deserted place and rest for a while, Mark 6:31. But a crowd met them when they landed. Coming up, Jesus will leave Galilee and try not to be noticed, maybe with the intention of getting that rest he was talking about, but somebody will recognize him. Verse 24. From there he arose and went away into the borders of Tyre and Sidon. He entered into a house and didn't want anyone to know it, but he couldn't escape notice. For a woman whose little daughter had an unclean spirit, having heard of him, came and fell down at his feet. Now the woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by race. She begged him that he would cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, "Let the children be filled first, for it is not appropriate to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs." But she answered him, "Yes, Lord, yet even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." He said to her, "For this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter." She went away to her house and found the child having been laid on the bed, with the demon gone out. Comment. In verse 24, the text is very non-precise about the location, other than it was the general region of Tyre and Sidon, which was the coastal area north of Galilee. It could have been just barely north of Galilee or up to 60 miles north. To Jews, it was a foreign place. Jesus was trying to escape notice. He entered a house and didn't want anyone to know it, so it seems his sole purpose for being there was just for him and his disciples to get some rest. When your narrator was a youngster, he lived in Memphis, Tennessee, Elvis Presley's hometown. Elvis couldn't go anywhere without being recognized and swarmed. People went insane around him, pressing on him, treating him as a god. Though he was known as having a soft heart for the public, he usually stayed holed up in his house. It was his only option. When he went out, it was often in the middle of the night. If he wanted to go to the movies, he arranged a private showing for himself in the wee hours of the morning. Jesus is having to resort to some of the same tactics because it was simply impossible to tend to the multitudes constantly. He had no big fenced-in estate with security guards back in Galilee where he could get a moment's rest. But still in verse 25, a Syrophoenician woman recognized him. She had a little daughter at home with an unclean spirit, which is the same thing as a demon, Luke 8:27 and 29. The daughter was, quote, severely possessed, Matthew 15:22, so whatever the demon was doing, it was dramatic. Putting this together with Matthew's account of the same event, the woman kept following Jesus, crying out, "Have mercy on me, Lord, you Son of David. My daughter is severely possessed by a demon." End quote. She fell at his feet. He ignored her for a while. Quote, "He answered her not a word." End quote. So why did he ignore and not answer? If he had granted her request, she would have gone home, found her daughter well, spread the news to her neighbors, and it would have been vacation over, just like that one day in the beginning in Capernaum when he healed Peter's mother-in-law, and by the end of the same day he was swamped with people looking for help. Luke 4:38 through 41. Ever since that day there's been no let-up, although we sometimes managed to slip away to deserted places to pray. Luke 6:12. He explained to the woman it's not appropriate to take the children's bread and throw it to the dogs, and I wasn't sent to any but the lost sheep of the house of Israel. But it wasn't with malice. So how can we say he was without malice, that he called her a dog and refused to help her? It's a trick question because it assumes God owed her something. No one can say, "God, you owe me." And she didn't say that. She only begged. In the Old Testament, God's covenant was with Israel, Exodus 19:3-6 and Romans 9:4. But if anyone from any nation was willing to subject himself to God and to the law, God would accept him as an Israelite, Exodus 12:48, Leviticus 19:34, Leviticus 24:22, and Numbers 10:29. And turning it around, God treated many Israelites as foreigners based on their refusal to keep the covenant, Leviticus 26:14-46. In Old Testament times, God healed a foreigner of leprosy without healing any Israelites, and fed a foreigner during a famine without feeding any Israelites, Luke 4:25-27. So it's not that God didn't love and accept foreigners or that he exclusively cared for Israel. So why then did Jesus call Israelites children in verse 27 and the woman a dog? He didn't call all Israelites his children. He called some of them children of the devil, John 8:44. And he called Israelites dogs as well. Quote, "Do not give what is holy to the dogs or throw your pearls before pigs," Matthew 7:6. So why did he say he was sent only to the lost sheep of the house of Israel? That was just a temporary assignment because he also said, "For God so loved the world that he sent his Son," John 3:16. Jesus didn't even go to all Israel, never anywhere south of Jerusalem, but spent most of his time in the Jewish backwater of Galilee. But this is all beside the point of the text, which is that he helped her because of her faith and humility. When she said, "Even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs," she was recognizing she was a dog of a sinner, and that he didn't owe her anything, that healing was easy for him, and she conceded God's love for Israel. So with all that, Jesus felt moved to return the honor. In verse 30, the woman went home and found the little daughter, quote, "having been laid on the bed with the demon gone out," end quote. After being terrorized in the household by a demon, what was more peaceful and rewarding than a sleeping child? Coming up, Jesus will depart that area, maybe because his cover is blown, and go directly to another mostly foreign area, Decapolis, on the other side of the Sea of Galilee. Verse 31. Again he departed from the borders of Tyre and Sidon and came to the Sea of Galilee through the middle of the region of Decapolis. They brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. They begged him to lay his hands on him. He took him aside from the multitude privately and put his fingers into his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, "Ephphatha," that is, "be opened." Immediately his ears were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was released, and he spoke clearly. He commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, so much the more widely they proclaimed it. They were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done all things well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak." Comment: there weren't any cases in the Old Testament of a prophet opening the eyes of the blind or the ears of the deaf. Isaiah said it would happen, Isaiah 29:18, 35:5, and 42:18, but he wasn't clear whether it would happen in the literal sense. His readers might assume he was speaking figuratively, that spiritually blind and deaf people would have their spiritual eyes and ears opened. But like so many other prophecies that seem to be only figures of speech, Jesus caused it to happen literally. In verse 35, immediately the deaf man heard and he spoke clearly. Someone might ask, how is it that his speech cleared up immediately? After he began to hear, didn't he have to go through a learning process before he could speak clearly? No, that's part of why in verse 37, quote, they were astonished beyond measure, end quote. Since there was a miracle of healing, why couldn't there be a miracle of learning along with it? Mark 8 is next at landofhavilah.net. Mark 8.